Awesome. We're live, y'all. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Welcome to Supernova's first webinar of our webinar series, Grow and Scale, a series for cannabis business and entrepreneurs of color. And I am Amber Center. I'm one of the co-founders of Supernova, as well as the executive director. And we have all the board members on today. So I see Whitney here in the comments in the chat. And Raeven Duckett is going to be moderating this panel today. And Issa is also probably in the chat. So feel free to say what up. And also feel free to use this chat to ask questions, things of that nature. So I want to talk a little bit about Supernova and what we do. Supernova is an organization of women of color that works to empower people of color to become self-sufficient shareholders in the cannabis industry. So we do that through education, like this webinar that you're attending today. We do that through advocacy and our advocacy efforts. For instance, we worked very hard last year to lower the taxes for small businesses and social equity businesses in the city of Oakland. And we also advocated very heavily for the social equity program in Oakland. And we also host networking events. So, we are in the age of COVID and those things aren't really happening right now. But when they do, we do throw networking events. And Supernova is also a pretty newly formed 501c3. We were founded in 2015, but we recently applied for 501c3 status. So that's pretty exciting. So thank you, everyone, for your donations and for chiming in and being a part of our first webinar and our first webinar series. And that's pretty much it for me. I'm going to turn it over to Raeven, and Raeven's going to get started here with the webinar. So thanks so much, Raeven.
Awesome. Thanks, Amber. And thank you for everyone for coming out today and showing up for us. As you know, this webinar is about sales strategies to get shelf space. And so Amber talked a little bit about the Supernova Women board. Another interesting fact about us is that 3 of us are operators within the cannabis industry. And we currently have packages and products that we sell throughout the industry. I actually am an equity applicant myself. And so day to day, we find that there are certain barriers and kind of hardships to get on a shelf as a product manufacturer. And so we put together this conference to talk about that. And so we have 3 very qualified panelists today that I'm really excited to talk to and get their opinions on a few topics. And so what we'll do is start out with introductions. Feel free to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, your title, explain where you fall within the cannabis supply chain. Feel free to talk about how long you've been in the industry and where did you start in the industry. It would be really interesting. So we'll start with Salwa, we'll go to Ramon, and then we'll go to Amber. So go ahead, Salwa.
Okay, my name is Salwa Ibrahim, and I've been in the cannabis industry since 2008. It's 12 years now. And I have had the good fortune and sometimes pain of being across the supply chain. My current role right now is partner in MKSI Investments. And through our investments, we have basically literally every part of the supply chain, from growing to manufacturing to retail. And I also serve as owner and I guess president of Cookies Oakland in downtown Oakland, and am an investor in Cookies. So I guess I can say too of how I got started in the cannabis industry. I got started working for Oaksterdam University and Richard Lee. We did Proposition 19, which was the first effort to legalize cannabis. I helped manage, I was like the only employee of the parent company. So I helped Richard Lee manage the grow, the retail, the school, as well as the political efforts. And that's how I got started.
Wonderful. Thank you. Ramon?
Hi, my name is Ramon Garcia, longtime activist and second generation cultivator and activist. Been around cannabis since probably 6-7 years old. My family always taught this as medicine, and our family was always raised with this as part of our healing medicine, and amongst many others. So I've been around this subject for a long time. Been even before the legal market, distributing and cultivating since probably high school, myself personally, indoor, outdoor, everything, and then running packs up and down the freeways, of course. Just parlaying that now into Sanctuary Farms, which is my family farm that we were able to license in Mendocino and Nevada County, and trying to build that up, and Padre Mood Distribution, which is equity distribution here in Oakland, who represents primarily equity brands, small family-owned and legacy brands.
Awesome. And then Amber?
Hi, I'm Amber Lopez. I work at Magnolia Wellness as the inventory buyer and the inventory manager. I've been there and in the industry for 6 years. I started off as a bud tender, went to inventory management and bookkeeping, and then just took on the inventory buying after a couple of the other buyers left. I've always been interested in cannabis. I've loved doing cannabis. I've always wanted to be the buyer and be the one to take in the product and stuff and see and make sure people get the good product and stuff. I also have helped with the Congo Club / Breeze distribution with like packaging and doing like administrative work and filing taxes and stuff like that.
So taxes, very important job for sure. Okay, so can we, before we get into the questions, maybe Ramon, you might be great to answer this question. Can you talk about the cannabis supply chain, specifically as it applies to California? Kind of talking about the important role a distributor plays within the California legal cannabis industry, and kind of how, a flower gets to the shelf, and or however that goes, kind of like that. We can't hear you, Ramon. You might be on mute.
Sorry about that. Distribution. So distribution was put in the middle of the supply chain, kind of like it was before, as we were moving packs and from the farms down to the inner city communities. So the distribution, they set it up so that there couldn't be monopolies supposedly in the supply chain, and there wouldn't be specific control of the supply chain. So the cultivators cultivate the product. They have to move through a distributor to test and package and get that product to the actual retailers. Can only buy that finished packaged product from distributors. Same thing with manufacturers. They can manufacture their products, but they have to sell and test through a distributor, and then that distributor fulfills their product to the retailers.
Got it, definitely. So unlike the medical market in California or some other markets throughout the United States, the legal market in California, anything sold into a retailer, be it non-storefront or brick and mortar, needs to go through a distributor. And that is something really important to know when thinking about getting on shelves, for sure. So the first thing we're going to talk about is just really the product, right? And so what I want to talk about is, how do you determine when a product is ready for shelves? And also, what is the difference, if any, that you all see between a good product and a good brand? And Salwa, if you want to start us out with that, I feel like Cookies is a really good, point in the industry that really understands the product and the brand and that type of balance.
So for me, I think that I always say flower first, product first. Product is sort of the number one thing that we look at, the quality of the product. In my mind, there are 4 things that make up a brand. It is 4 different silos that I'm looking at. The first silo is product, the quality of the product, like, and just what it is, how it's packaged, and the quantity, okay? The second is price point. The third is marketing, and the fourth is packaging. That's how you break it out. I think that most people can rely on any one of the silos heavily to get into a store, but to stay into a store, you have to have a really good balance of those four things. So when people come to Cookies Oakland, we know that being in our store basically is a door opener for the brand to be in everybody else's store. And so when you come into Cookies Oakland, you got to play to win, right? Like, we are there, and you got to have your price point dialed in, your quality dialed in, your packaging is dialed in, and the marketing are behind it. So the marketing can be anything from Instagram to like a celebrity rapper or whatever else. Like, it has to be somewhat balanced. Or like, it has to make sense. The other thing that I'm looking for when a brand comes to me is, I know from experience that there are plenty of holes in the supply chain right now as far as product is concerned. When you're evaluating each four of those silos, there are holes in the supply chain between quantity and quality and brand and marketing. And so the first thing I'm looking for is, do you fill one of those holes? Right? Can I rely on you for consistency? Is the flour that you're bringing in the same flour that I'm getting somewhere else for a better price point, but that they have a higher Instagram following? So really what I'm looking at is those four categories.
Is that a cue for me? Sorry, you cut out. I was going to echo. All right. Yeah, I number one, like, I've seen a lot of different products come through, and the number one thing, and 100% agree with Salwa, is the quality of your product, period. And that doesn't mean that it has to be top shelf. What that means is, relative to other products in your same category, is the quality of that product, either comparable or, better quality. Like, if you have a value brand product, then compared to other value brand products, what's the quality of that product, right? And then that's number one. It's quality of your product. Does it do what it says it's going to do? So when a consumer comes to spend money, they just want to know that they get the value of that dollar, whether they spend $20 or $100. Do they feel like they got that value back? And part of that is like the story that you're telling about the product. Like, people can put 30% on your flower brand, and if the person smokes that and they don't feel like that compares to other flower brands that were at 30%, then they're not going to come back. And that goes to really understanding your product, representing it well, the quality of that product, and then also the consistency. Like, anybody can sell once. You can sell a product once, right? The gross margin doesn't matter. It does matter in the bigger picture, but if you have a cheap product and it sells once and nobody comes back, it doesn't matter that it's a product or a low value product. Like, if you have a high-end top shelf product and people buy it and they only buy it once, it doesn't matter. And so that consistency, that people feel like they get that product and they go back and they try it again, they get the same results, then that's what's going to build your brand, that consistency and quality. And then, with that also is like understanding your product and your story, and making sure that whatever your product is meant to do, the consumer gets that result. If your product, if you say it's going to put you in the couch, then it better put you in the couch. If it's going to give you an uplifting, happy high, then I better feel uplifting and happy. Like.
And so, Amber, I'd like to hear a point of view on this, especially when it comes to price points, which we talked about a lot, and perhaps the holes that you see in the market, that kind of brand coming in pitching for Magnolia.
So, like, with the demographic that we have in my area, we're in like the lower, price range for people. People don't make as much. So for us, make sure that we have quality product that, mostly that would cost like $70 an eighth. we'll sometimes have like maybe 1 or 2 of those in there just to satisfy those every once in a while customers. But we really have to think about the price point, because some people need to be able to buy more product so they have more medicine, rather than just gain the quality, just gain the quality. But like trying to get both of those in is really tough at the point right now, because now with like probably the COVID, prices are probably, there's a couple of dispensaries that aren't open right now. And so we have to the quality is going to have to match with the prices. And if we see that there are some better qualities that we see in like other stores that are selling faster, we'll think about those, but we'll have to see if those match our demographics. Basically we just have to continue and make sure that their prices are going to stay consistent. Sometimes they'll maybe start working with us a little bit more and having a lower price so we can give it to the patients a little bit lower. But hoping that they'll have the consistent same quality, because sometimes we'll get samples of something and the product will be completely different, and then it's I'm getting played here a little bit. But yeah, you don't want that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then holes you see in the market, currently see in the market?
Holes I'm seeing in the market right now are seeing top quality, because I only see a main few top companies, but they're more of the bigger brands and stuff, and not more of the smaller equity brands and stuff that I would like to see. And I think a lot of the equity brands are starting to get to that point where their quality is matching with their marketing and stuff like that, and they're getting a lot more traction. So I've been taking on more equity brands, so to gotta hype them up and stuff like that. And they're a lot from our area, so we want to encourage them and stuff like that.
How are any point of view on holes you see in the market right now in terms of product availability and what's missing from the landscape right now?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of holes in the market right now, especially when you break down quantity, right? How many disposable 0.25 gram carts are there? How many disposable 1 gram carts are there? How much shake is out there? How much littles, how much smalls, how much are you know what I mean? There's so many different areas of the market that I think are ripe for the picking. You have to be really smart about the data sets that you use when you're building your brand. One person that I would like to kind of highlight a little bit on this is Peaks. I think he did a really smart job of the way he kind of rolled out his brand from our perspective. He did not come to Cookies first. He went to other dispensaries first to test out his products. He would buy small quantities of pounds. He understood that only a quarter, maybe half of it at best, he actually wanted to jar. And then he figured out something to do with the rest of that pound. And so as he's jarring these small quantities and making sure it looks good, he's also being able to brand in real time. So while we're all stuck at home during quarantine watching Tiger King, guess what he does? He busts out the Tiger King 8th. And we're great, bring it. And then so he's prepped when he comes to us. And when he comes to us, it's marketing's on point. He knows we like big buds. He knows that our demographic likes to Instagram their thing, and then we like that. And so it's all lined up. But he also knows that the relationship's super important. So he's coming to us, and whether it's true or not, he's telling us that we're getting a better deal than everybody else, right? And so we're feeling special, and he's local, and it's good. And so we're okay, great, we'll try you. But he's also standing by it and being if you need anything, if you want me to return anything, if you want me to stand in front of your store and hype up Peaks, I will do it. And obviously we'll never ask him to do it, but guess what? It works. And then he's also giving samples out to the bud tenders. The bud tenders are starting to love it. They're putting it on their Instagram, and guess what? He's now in a lot of stores.
For sure. Cool. Ramon, do you have any thoughts on what might be missing within the market in terms of products right now?
I mean, I primarily focus on equity brands, specifically because uh, number one, that's the community I was raised in, but particularly because what people often equate equity with being a lower quality product, and I try to tell people these people have been in, especially the ones that I deal with, have been in this industry selling weed for a long time. Their market, they know their products. Like the only part that they're lacking is some of the other stuff that's I was talking about in terms of like the marketing and understanding like how to build those relationships and keep that consistency and quality and making sure and pay attention to those little things like Jesse does. He pays attention to those little things, and that makes the difference between him. It's funny because I worked in the music industry for a long time, and it equates to this, like what makes you different, right? If there's 10 jars sitting in front of a buyer, what makes your product different? Or if there's 10 cartridges that sit in front of the buyer, what makes your different? And you talked about it a little bit in terms of the quality and consistency, but that's not just it. Like you have to really pay attention to the market, and you have to do the research. You got to go out there, and great point, where you got to go into the stores and talk to the bud tenders and be like, what do you sell a lot of? What do you not sell? What do you need more of? What do you need less of? Like, do that market research, hit the streets, and then figure out how to apply your product into holes or create SKUs that fit holes in different places. You have to be flexible. Like with cookies, they're selling a lot of high-end products and you know products. So like if you're coming with a bag of eighths, like if your product doesn't match up against the other products, then it's probably not going to sell there. It's probably not a good idea to spend a lot of time in there. Like, do the research, know what each dispensary has their own like demographic, their own customer base, and they're not all the same. So you can't just put a cookie cutter on it and just think it's going to work for every dispensary. You actually have to go out there and do some research and talk to some people and figure out how you can fit into one of those holes. But there's a lot of value brand products and a lot of holes, especially in equity. There's not a lot of edibles. The black and brown edibles. There's not a lot of drinks that we make. The value stuff. A lot of us are trying to do just high end, so that's saturated. Like, maybe come with a very quality sun grown product, or what I mean, or half ounce bags that are at a value price, where now it's really good product in these half ounce bags. Like that's how a couple of these larger brands made their name into the game, is they provide a really quality product at a value price and built up their brand, and then now they can put out these other SKUs and start charging more. So there's a lot of holes in the market.
Raeven, can I add something? Do you mind? I want to say one more thing while I'm thinking about Peaks. What's also good about what he did was he created a brand for himself as a consumer. Like, he created a brand for like what he and his friends like, right? So it's very authentic. He knows his consumer. He knows what like it should smell like, what it should look like, what the branding should be like, which he is also happens to line up with who our target demographic is, right? So like, one thing that I feel like people are making a mistake of is they're creating these brands around these like ghost consumers, like who they think will like it or who they think will be a cannabis consumer versus like the person that they know, right? And like, if you're really authentic and create a brand about to hit the consumer it will thrive. And then keeping in mind what Ramon just said, the price point is really it's obviously like a killer. It either makes it or breaks it. So you have to find that perfect nexus of profitability against market. And then also you have to understand too, you might be thinking you're making a value brand if you create a certain wholesale cost, but understanding the compound taxes in whatever jurisdiction you're in, so you really understand what the price point is to the end consumer, which you're thinking, you're like, hey, it's 18 bucks an eighth. Like, this is going to be a good value brand, not knowing that, well, when the consumer picks it up, it's going to be $45, maybe even 50.
Yeah. And say that again.
I thought you were starting to say something. I was saying, you're saying it's
yeah,
great.
I was gonna.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, like, to Salwa's point, I try everything. Like, I try it. I make sure I do exactly that. I give it to my friends. Hey, what do you think about this? Like, that's a big point. Like, and why I trust a lot of these equity brands is because, like, literally, I try everything and I make sure that that quality fits what their set is, like that it's actually doing what it's doing. Like, but another point I wanted to make about the price point, oftentimes for us as small brands, as equity brands, it's hard to fit those price points. And so that's why quality is even more important sometimes in making sure that you have that quality and consistency, because we're sourcing product oftentimes, since we can't buy larger bulk, we have to source it at higher prices, and you know, testing might cost us more, packaging might cost us more, because we're not buying, you know, 50,000 units, we're buying 3,000, and so now you're paying 10-20 cents more a jar. Like, factor all of that into what you're doing, and make it balanced and stay consistent with the quality. Like, sometimes I just know that I can't beat some price points because we just can't compete with that, and that's okay. Like, for me, I just go to those places that can, or I, you know, tell my story. Tell your story of who you are and where you're coming from and where your product is, and know your product, and like, trust in that. And you know, some people will be willing, like, yes, they might be able to get this product at 11 and yours is at 13, but if you tell your story and they test your product and they see the quality, then you know, people, buyers are willing to work with you, especially if you know your stuff. If what you say it is, and the buyer opens it and it's exactly what they said, that trust factor, that they say, okay, this guy knows his product, I can feel comfortable getting more product from him or her, because you know, they're exactly what they're telling me it is. It has that OG nose, and it's this and that, like, and they open it up and everything is consistent with that. Then that trust factor is big, and that's what makes the difference between one sale and multiple sales, is that if they trust that every time you come and sell them a product, it is what it is, then they're going to start increasing their orders. Then they're going to start asking you, hey, what else do you carry, or what other SKUs do you have that might fit some holes in my menu? And so, like, there is that difficulty, and that's what we compete as people of color in this industry. Like, we're competing against people with a lot of money, and so you have to be even more, you have to do even more research, and you have to be more focused on the overall end of your product and what your margins is, and we do have to be a little bit flexible with that.
Definitely. So I think this made me, our next topic is talk about sales strategy and the sales team, but I feel like I have a question that's a good bridge for that, which is, let's talk about marketing. So based on what the three of you are saying, it sounds like a product is going to have at least like two marketing subjects, which is going to be definitely your end consumer, so whoever's coming into the dispensary and actually buying your product. But it sounds like they also need to somewhat market to buyers, to bud tenders, to dispensary workers and things like that. So can you talk about what are kind of the best practices or some of the good examples? Sorry, you're talking about Pete's, good examples of brands and products that have been able to effectively market to consumers, and also effectively build relationships and market to bud tenders and in-store staff. Amber, I'd love if you start and tell us a little bit about some good brands you've seen that have done both.
Some good brands that have done a lot of work with, like, you know, with growing as a company, with providing, you know, samples to employees, to me as a buyer, for us to try the product, and it has been like Canatique has been one. It's not an equity brand, but they're a local company that's been in town. I've had Blank Brands, which is a chocolate company, and they've always come in. They bring in, they build relationships with our bud tenders. They come in on days where I'm not even like there, just to like have FaceTime with them. They come in and they ask if we're willing to do like, demos when we were able to pre-COVID, doing their best to be able to, self-market out by word of mouth more so than just their online marketing. Because, with us being like a community dispensary, like people, overall a lot and stuff like that, and inside community talking with each other and, getting to know the brands. And a lot of brands have, through the markets that we've had, have been able to have a lot of FaceTime with our, customers and our bud tenders, and being able to just talk to them and build relationships that way. And, being able to, on off times, be able to consume together to, try it out and talk to each other about that. With like Brinkland, for example, they come in, they bring non-medicated samples, and then they bring medicated samples on a manifest, so we can just do that legally. And then we like to give feedback because they've gone through a couple different changes in their product, and they've been really receptive to it. Like, oh, this recipe didn't taste that good. Like, can you tweak it or something? And they'll like go back and, try fixing the recipe and like, coming up with like a consensus between like different dispensaries and seeing like what is going to sell and not sell. So that's been something that's helped out a lot and been able to move their product really well, that we've been able to increase our orders and do it more frequently.
Salwa, you talked a lot about the brand and how they did a good job of building the relationship within the dispensary. Can you how their social media or their online presence kind of directly to the consumer also speaks to how their branding is? Does that make sense?
Sort of. I kind of understand what you're asking.
What are good examples in consumer marketing?
I'm sorry, Raeven, you're totally cutting out.
Sorry. So brands that have good in consumer marketing, so brands that have strong social medias or Facebook, are there other platforms? I'm sure there's their website. Like, what kind of shows that a brand has good marketing when it comes to marketing directly?
For us, we live and die by Instagram. Like our community is on Instagram. Most of the cannabis community is on Instagram. Like that's where we go to look. I'll give you a good example of like a real life story that happened to us. We had one of our regular consumers ask us for this one brand called King Cookie. They're like, oh, hey, do you carry King Cookie? And we're like, we've never heard of it, whatever. And they're like, well, you should carry it because we go to Sacramento to go get it. And we're like, okay. So we go, and the first thing we do is we check Instagram, and they have like 50,000 followers. So I'm like, okay, great. Like I'll hit them up. So we basically started carrying them because we knew that as soon as they got into our store, that's 50,000 impressions right there from their social media that our store gets, right? So it's like we're all creating these free commercials for each other, right? Like Instagram's a free commercial. Your social media should be a free commercial. Once those kind of line up, you're serving each other, right? So in my mind, the way I think of this is I'm a retailer. Running a retail store is super expensive. Every square footage of my store costs money. Every brand that I carry costs money for me to hold. It's cost staff time, it's real estate, it's an expense. So the fastest way for me to recuperate my money is to sell through it as fast as I can. How do I sell through it? I market it on social media, and I rely on the brand to do the same. And if I can move it quick, that means I'm making my money back. That means they're getting their money back faster, and it's a win-win situation.
So then, Ramon, I want to start this question with you talking about the sales team and sales strategy. So can you spend some time talking about what are the best strategies for a new brand with a small budget to get on the shelves of some high volume dispensaries And then can you also talk about what are the benefits of hiring a distribution partner, someone who distributes for a number of brands, as opposed to just self-distributing or hiring just one independent contractor to distribute your personal brand?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of like some of the strategies for sales teams, that for us, you kind of have to understand the industry. I'll start this by saying, like, for new brands and new products, especially, in the Black and brown community, um, and don't take this wrong, Salwa, because I'm not talking specifically to you, but there's a lot of entitlement in cannabis buyer industry. They a lot of buyers have their methods and their ways, and they don't like back down off of that. Like, you have, if you're going to get your product into their store, you kind of have to adjust to whatever that is. There's been dispensaries that it's taken me 6 months to get into, but once I got into there and built that trust and relationship, like, the products spoke for themselves because they did what they did, and they helped the bottom line of that buyer, and that built up that trust. Trust is a big thing. Like, with buyers, like, that relationship is a big thing. And so, like Saul was saying, I had to show up. I had to come, like Amber was saying, I had to come even when I wasn't selling them something. I had to show up and talk to the bud tenders. That's a big thing. Like, more than the buyers. I started this like 2 years ago. I only gave out samples to the bud tenders. I didn't even give a sample to the buyer. And some of the buyers were like, well, why'd you do that? And I'm like, because they're directly connected to your consumer base. They're going to know exactly what your consumers want or don't want, and they're going to tell you. And so that if they believe in your product, then they're going to sell it. Like, and they're going to push it, and it's going to be top on their mind, right? And so, like, you have to, like, build those relationships and trust, and that means, like, doing some groundwork. You have to hit the ground. You got to show up at dispensaries. Sometimes they're not going to be there. You got to come back 2 days later and show up, and hey, like, do some of that consumer research first. Find out where the holes are and what their customer base is, and then make that meeting with the buyer and figure out how your products fit some of those holes or don't. Like, it's hard. It really is. And so that's where your second question sometimes helps. So, like, follow up is big. Showing up one time at a dispensary and dropping samples and dropping your menu is not enough. You need to follow up with them and ask them how those samples work, get some feedback, like, show up again and be like, oh, if that doesn't work, then, what would you like to work? Like, you have to really grind for that feedback, because that's what's going to help you fit your product into that store. And then sometimes it's working with a distributor that already has existing relationships is just that. Like, it's repetition. I Because I was in the buyers' faces, like, once a week or once every 2 weeks, delivering product and talking to them, like, that consistency made them have a little more trust for the products. And then, that led to, I've had dispensaries where a salesperson was trying to get in there for 6 months, and when the buyer found out that I was distributing that product, we had already had a built-up relationship. They ordered it through me, and the salesperson got a little bit irritated because they've been trying to get in there for 6 months. My point was, like, however you get in there, you get in there, and like, and so you have to build up those relationships. And so with distributors that already go to multiple dispensaries, you're going to have a lot more opportunity to enter into different markets. They already have some existing built up relationships, and it doesn't have to be exclusive. Like, you can still do your own sales and get into other areas, but that's going to help you, like, spread that footprint wider quicker than just you could, or if it's just you and one other person pushing your brand, like you're not going to be able to hit 60 dispensaries in a week. Like you might be able to hit 10. Well, that distributor can hit the other 30, 40 for you and drop your menu off and talk to the buyers and filter some of that. So there is some advantage to that built up relationship with distributors that already have those high income accounts, those high volume accounts.
Definitely, that makes total sense. So Amber and then Salwa, I'd love to hear how those relationships work in terms of the larger distributors you buy from. Do you find that when they bring on new products, you're more likely to try it out, give it a shot, and then kind of also to talk a little bit about when you do, I'm sure smaller distributors and brands hit you up via email and all kind of things, calls like they do me as well. So how do those brands break through? Like, how do they actually get the meeting? Is it showing up like we keep kind of talking about? Is it doing something else? So Amber, go ahead and start with that one.
So with me over at Magnolia, I prefer to have emails and stuff like that just because I'm mostly on my computer and having that right there. But sometimes, like, some vendors will come in, just walk in and ask for them. And sometimes it's the right time where I have some free time. And I'm always open to that, especially for like newer brands and stuff like that, people that don't have like those big, strong sales people and stuff like that, or distributors at the moment because they're still like working their way up there. The benefits of having a distributor is that, like Ramon was saying, that if they already have a good rapport with them, it'll be easier to be like, hey, like I have this new product, they're just starting out. Here's it, like preferably would try a sample just because it's newer. I probably wouldn't take a brand new brand without having like a sample to try out to make sure it's like something that my demographic would want and it's actually of good quality. And so with like, I do enjoy having vendors follow up every so often, not too much to where it's like overwhelming because there are so many other vendors I have to deal with. And, there's only so many days in a week that a buyer is there. And, some places do have the benefits of having 2 buyers to where they have it split up so they can see more vendors and stuff like that. So that's something to think about, is like making sure what dispensaries, what their kind of like structure is, because some places like you only have to do like email and stuff like that and then get an appointment. I'm kind of just like a open book to all of it, just like depending on what my time's like. But pretty much like I'm really open to new brands and stuff like that, especially if like the product's good and that I've allowed my like bud tenders to try out before like getting it, and then seeing like if they're open to like working with us and being like consistent and like being kind of forefront and able to keep a good rapport with like not just me but with like everyone in the building and the customers.
Do you find that you are more likely to try the new products from the distributors that you're already working with? And then also, what do you think are some good strategies for smaller brands, newer products to kind of get on a cookies like radar, breaking through all the noise that you may hear from other brands?
So I took a couple notes because I wanted to make sure I kind of highlight a couple things. Number one is that I think as an equity brand, you should demand feedback. Like, you should never not get feedback. If somebody does not pick up your brand, you should know why. And I think it's our responsibility as dispensaries to lift up the equity brands by giving them resources to do better. And for me, we will always look at every brand because there's always the newest shit, the hottest shit, and I want to know what it is, and I want it in my store before it goes to everybody else, right? So we are not like, I can appreciate that like buyers are entitled or appear to be entitled because they kind of got it like that. But for us, we don't close the door. We always keep the door open, and people are welcome to come back and like show us their stuff. To Ramon's point, the bud tenders are excellent gateway to getting into a store and to moving your product. If they like you, they will move your product, which then the buyer is going to keep you in rotation, right? But it's not just the buyer. Like, the buyer absolutely makes the decisions, but they're so easily swayed by their teammates. They're easily swayed by the managers, the assistant managers, and the bud tenders. If they're talking about something, guess what? You got the buyer's attention, right? I would also say that brands have to be, equity brands specifically, have to be extremely mindful of their expenses, right? And you have to take into fact every single expense, not just like, oh, that was only $50, I don't need to track it. Just keep track of every single expense. So then that way you have a better understanding of like where you need to be and what kind of brand and what kind of price point is sustainable for you, right? And then as far as distributors are concerned, I have two schools of thought on it. Number one, it kind of doesn't really matter because a lot of good brands self-distribute. And so we're not going to be like, oh, it came from this distributor or whatever. I don't really care. But at the same time, so something like Herbal, when all of the robberies happened in Oakland, Herbal came back and they're like, oh, hey, sorry this happened to you. Here's a ton of free product, like just so you could get up on your feet. That was great. And they got our attention. We're like, wow, that was really cool. What else you got? What's on your list? And guess what? Like, Herbal just really quickly became our favorite distributor. But just by doing something like that, showing up is half the battle in anything in cannabis. I don't care what part of the supply chain you're on. If you show up, 50% of the battle is done. Someplace like Cookies Oakland, we for a brand to come in, say what's up to the bud tenders, introduce them to the store managers, hit up the buyer doesn't really want it, you could come back in a week. I personally think persistence is key. Like, just come in, show up, be friendly. And then also too, when it comes to marketing dollars, when a brand drops off food, that is the fastest way to win staff love. Save your marketing dollars, just buy pizza. And it just genuinely goes a long way.
No, that's funny.
And then it's true.
No, really, that goes to the relationship building that you were just talking about. Like you're building relationships. That's what sales is, and the more comfortable they feel with you and your product and your story and your consistency, the more likely you're going to get in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just being friendly, and eventually, I hate to say it like this, but you can wear anybody down with kindness. Like, if you really want to get into a store, just show up, be cool, bring them a $15 pizza.
Yeah, pizza is always a good idea. Moral of the story.
Yeah.
So you maybe got the order, your brand, or
Can I say one more thing, Raeven? I'm sorry to interrupt. I would also say, when you are trying to figure out if you should self-distribute versus going to a distribution company, you really need to backtrack from what your financial goals are, because there is a sweet spot between having the whole pie or having a slice of a much larger pie, right? And in that, especially for people who self-distribute, you're still paying for real estate, you're paying for staff, and it's overwhelming to run a brand and self-distribute. So although it may look extremely unattractive to have a large distributor take a huge chunk of your blood, sweat, and tears, it actually might end up making really good financial sense for you. And that way you can focus on the things that you like to do, such as marketing and talking about your brand and doing the footwork and building those relationships and having somebody else deal with everything.
And an important factor about that is in equity and Black and Brown community, a lot of times we don't have the resources. You're a 1 or 2 man show, or maybe you just have a very small staff, and so then if you have to focus on building your brand, sourcing, packaging, also distribution, collecting taxes, that's a big piece of it. then you're not able to scale up your brand as quickly, because you, like I tell the brands, and I've told a lot of equity brands, like, be a brand or be a distributor, right? But a lot of times we don't have the resources right away to be both. And so making partnerships with others that are like-minded and understand your vision and your, your scalability and are trying to help you grow, like that helps you a lot of times to scale your business up a lot quicker. And so exactly what Salwa said is true. Like sometimes a smaller piece of the pie is actually a bigger piece of the pie, because you're doing such bigger volume and you're able to stay so much more consistent that you don't have drops in your sales, or you don't have highs and lows. Like you're very consistent across the board, and that allows you to scale up at a rate that helps you build your brand. And a lot of people have that problem with trying to do too much and not able to focus their attention really good on one thing. If you're trying to build a brand, then build a brand. If you're trying to be a distributor, then be a distributor. If you're trying to be a cultivator, then be a cultivator. You're trying to be a retailer, be a retailer. But a lot of times splitting your resources ends up hurting one or the other, or both.
Yep. And I would say too, is like how often, I bet anybody who's been in this industry for longer than 4 years, we're tired. Like it is exhausting doing this shit. Like what about having a good quality of life and a better experience in doing this work that we all love? And like the better way to have this experience is partnerships. And that means distribution. And that means like all of these other things. So it's like, don't feel like you need to do 100% of the work. Like definitely create those partnerships just so you have the longevity and you're not killing yourself over this. And it's a much more enjoyable experience. But at the same time, I would say be creative. Like don't go into these distribution companies thinking that whatever cookie cutter contract they're putting in front of you is it. Right? You could create stages for yourself, or price points, or milestones, or things that like work for you. So it's really about netting out your goals. Start with your goal and then working backwards from there, whether it be financial, whether it be nationwide, statewide, whatever it ends up being.
Definitely, that makes a lot of sense. I really like the mantra of like, be a distributor or be a retailer or be a brand. I think what everyone is kind of touching on is that it is really challenging to kind of wear all those hats as a smaller brand or company and really try to like do the best at social media. Yeah. Time and a lot of creativity and a lot of just resources trying to do that and all metric. And so
yeah. And I would also say too, Raeven, that equity groups right now have such a strong voice in this industry. Like instead, like, yes, we're focused on the politics. Yes, we're focused on city government. But another thing that I think would be a good focus for groups like Supernova is using your microphone to not to influence distributors to have better practices and fairer practices specifically for equity brands. That would be one thing that would help. And then a second thing that would help too is that there are brands who want to pitch in but don't know how. So giving them more creative ways to help equity brands. So one example would be like, hey, large brand, you're buying pallets of jars or you're buying pallets of this stuff and you're getting it way cheaper than any equity brand. Let us buy some of that. Let us capitalize on those margins that you're getting for yourself. So then those little things that you're getting end up helping equity brands so much. So as much as I hate to say it, like the work for social equity is huge, but one of the things that could give you instant financial ground would be something like that.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that too. Honestly, little self promotion. So you know the OEG has been able to create equity trade certification. We're getting ready to launch that, and that's exactly that. It's giving retailers the ability to identify equity in Black and Brown owned products. It allows the consumer to be to identify those products and be able to vote with their dollar and really make sure that you know their money is going back to that community economics. But it also allows us to network exactly what Salwa was talking about doing community purchasing, right? Of like products, whether it's stickers, jars, bags, those type of things. Even when it comes to the product, like if I can only purchase a 10-pound batch, but you know, I have three others that are also need to purchase a 10-pound batch. If I go up to the farm and we buy 50 pounds, we're going to get a lot better rate than if we buy 10, right? And so like there that like being very creative and flexible on how you do that. I was able to do just that with Gold Seal. They do packaging with other people, and so I was able to do exactly that. I was able to get jars at 20 cents less than I could have got them per jar if I would have purchased it myself. Like all those things, looking into co-packing with other folks who might have the equipment and pay them to actually do it, and you know get a better rate because we're all packaging our product in the same space, and it's bringing them more volume. It's also reducing you know our price points and helping our margin sets. And so that's what the equity trade certification is trying to do, is organize some of those resources and some of those connections so we can know who each other are in this industry, understand who what resources we have available to us and who our allies are, and be able to network and source that together. Community economics in this space that we're at right now with you know George and all these things that are going on in our media, we're understanding what the power of our economics is. And we like they don't care if we protest and burn shit down, but they will care if we stop spending our dollar with them. If we stop supporting these brands that are not supporting our communities, and we put our money into our own community brands, then that will speak volumes, and that will like move more policy and move more companies to change their internal policies because they're going to be forced to. Like we have a lot of brand power in this and spending power, and we need to start utilizing it to functionalize our communities and build that community economics.
Thank you, Ramon. Sorry to cut you off. I just want to make sure that we get to these questions that we have over here before our time is up. Can you see them, Raeven?
No, I don't. I don't actually. I'm in the chat.
Okay, if you click on stage.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how do we continue to support smaller equity brands when they have quality and consistency issues? What can we do as retailers to give constructive feedback and support these brands without pulling them off shelves or disappointing customers? So, Amber, do you want to?
I'll definitely say, yeah, Amber. Or I can just say a little real quick. What Sawa mentioned a little bit earlier, and so did Amber. Like getting that feedback is important. Like follow up and see how sales are going, and ask the buyer, you know, if they're having problems with it, what are those problems, to be able to tweak your product to be able to match that. Like you, as much feedback as you can get, collect it. Like, and that's what I do as a distributor for the brands. If I sell something and a buyer gives me some kind of feedback, good or bad, I feed that back to the brand and let them know. So if they're getting consistent feedback, they've gotten 3 or 4 buyers telling the same thing, and that tells you then you might, it's not just that one buyer, you might need to adjust your product or your packaging or your marketing or whatever that feedback is giving you. So just pay attention and like ask for that feedback 100%.
I'm going to agree with Ramon on this because a lot of it has to do with like sometimes some buyers just are going to be like, oh yeah, your product's good, but not pick it up after or anything like that. Being able to, as a small equity brand, being able to take the the criticism of it if their product isn't up to the par of what the dispensary is looking for. And you're just going to have to take that with stride and just be like, okay, well, I can improve from this. I need to figure out and go back to the team and figure out what I need to improve on this, and be able to spin it around in the next few weeks, if depending on like what the kind of product that you have, where you can, you know, come back to the buyer and be like, hey, try this out again. Let me know what you think. And just being able to just like have a good relationship with the dispensary, because like some dispensaries will, like, I'm willing to help out a brand to help improve them, just because, like, you know, I'll have a good rapport with them, and like sometimes their like consistency of quality isn't always there. So like, you know, being able to just be supportive in that way, and knowing their potential will help out a lot, from what I've noticed and stuff like that. So and a lot of these of our customers are starting to, you know, gravitate towards like the equity brands and stuff like that, because we've had like, you know, topicals and some edibles now, and mostly flowers. So being able to build those up, and just being able to compare them sort of to the other brands that are being able to survive and been around for a while with the quality that they're trying to get to, and maybe like see if they can have, like, if they need someone else that can help them with like the R&D process, see if they need like somebody else that can get them to the level that they need to, see if there's connections that you can help them out and direct them towards and stuff like that.
So we have a couple more questions, but I want to be respectful of time. So what we'll do is we will take these questions, and the Supernova group will work with Ramon and Salwa to answer them, get them answered, and we can send them out in the event recap. But we definitely want to thank everyone today for time out of your day to be a part of this. Oh, go ahead.
Before everybody leaves, I want to let everybody know that this is a webinar series that we're going to continue. So every 2 weeks, we're going to have a webinar for the next couple of months. So definitely follow Supernova on Instagram at Supernova Women. Follow us on Facebook at Supernova Women. Go to our website, supernovawomen.com. We are getting a new website this weekend, which is super exciting. We recorded this broadcast, so it will be posted to our social media networks as well as on our website. So please check back. And as I mentioned before, we are a nonprofit organization, so please donate to us. And our donations that we get go right back into our programming and everything that we do within Supernova. So thank you so much for your support throughout the years. And thank you to all of our panelists for all of these gems that you dropped today. We had 45 people on at one point. So thank you so much for everybody that tuned in. And thank you for sharing your knowledge and wealth of information, each of you. It's awesome that we get to bring such hive minds together and share this info, because this was a lot of really good information that we shared today. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much.
And I want to thank all you guys. I want to thank Supernova specifically for letting me be a part of this. I am very proud to be a minority on this panel today. I'm happy to be a part and to be a piece of it, and willing to help share whatever experiences and resources I have. Supernova and our group OEG, the original equity group, we work together to provide a lot of educational content to communities of color trying to enter into this market. And so I appreciate you guys' support. I feel honored to be a part of this, and I thank you guys for this.
Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. We like being included, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Salwa. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Raeven.
Guys, fun.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.